Hello and welcome to the agenda. I am Ajay Kaul. Today we will discuss about the army coup in Myanmar. Myanmar on India's eastern border is once again in turmoil. The military has seized power in the country which tasted democracy just for less than a decade after being ruled by the military for almost 50 years. Why did it happen? What will be its implications, particularly on India? We will try to find answers to such questions in the agenda today. We have with us retired diplomat Ambassador Anil Trigunayat and Mr. Jitendra Kumar Oja, who is an expert on geopolitical matters. But before we begin our conversation, let's have a look at this small report.
For nearly 5 decades since 1962, Myanmar had witnessed military rule, and after years of struggle, democracy was restored there just about a decade ago. The same democracy in India's neighboring country has been killed again with the army seizing power. The army staged the coup just when the party led by renowned pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi was to assume power after a resounding electoral victory. In the elections, the National League of Democracy of Suu Kyi got a landslide victory over the military-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party. The army alleged electoral frauds, which the Election Commission rubbished and imposed emergency in the country. According to the Myanmar army, the emergency is expected to last 1 year, after which elections will be held again. But the emergency can go on even longer. India has expressed deep concern over the developments and is watching closely, since these could have implications on our strategic interests. India has been having good engagements with Myanmar's military top brass, and it will have to tread a nuanced path in the wake of the unfolding developments in Myanmar. Bureau Report.
Now let's welcome our guests, Ambassador Trigunayat and Mr. Jitendra Oja. Welcome to the program, both of you, sir. So my first question is to Mr. Ambassador Trigunayat. You must be watching the developments in Myanmar. How do you see these developments? First reaction.
Well, these are very sad developments, actually. We were hoping that the democracy was finding roots in Myanmar, which is an important neighbor of India. Our relations with Myanmar have been growing, and therefore we have been working very closely with across the spectrum of the political dispensation, and our defense relationship was also growing quite significantly. Myanmar is very important from India's perspective as far as the connectivity issues are concerned. They have also helped us a great deal in confronting the terrorism that was coming from that side, and they even handed over several of these. So our collaboration has been very close. We have been assisting them. India has been providing all kinds of assistance. In fact, including just only last week, we provided them even vaccine. They are part of our support mechanism. But this is very unfortunate. It has happened, and the government of India has already expressed its concern, rather deep concern on what happened. Because we wanted the democratic transition after the November 8th election to take place, unfortunately there are domestic issues. And as you are aware, that problem in Myanmar has been that the army has continued to remain strong. And it was like a vehicle that was being driven by two people. So army at the same time, Prime Minister Suu Kyi as well as President there. So legally they say they have done according to 2008 Constitution, declared emergency and detained the leaders and have called for 1 year. But there are problems domestically in this thing. And then if you know the General Lang who has taken over, he himself was about to retire in July. Right. And he has been sanctioned by the United States for the Rohingya genocide and all those issues. So he wanted to continue, and this time during the election, his party, army is supposed to nominate about quarter of the total number of seats. But this time they have won very little, and that would have given away whatever little control they thought they had. So that is the reason that they came out of it, and I think that they had been calling it a fraud election. They objected to the seat arrangements and the voter list. And so I believe that this has been an issue that is very bad from the democracy's point of view, from this smooth transition, because now they will invoke quite a few sanctions from the Western countries. It will make life very difficult. The only country that is going to benefit out of it or being supportive is also China. Most of the Western countries have condemned. And we have only...
I'll come to the China factor later, but I have to ask Mr. Oja, strategically, how, I mean, you just heard Ambassador Trigunath about what India, how it had benefited from the, I won't call it full democracy which existed there, but now what will be the implications when the military takes over completely? Like particularly if you talk about a northeast insurgency which we had, I mean, which was curbed because of kind of democracy we had seen in Myanmar for last 10 years.
Look, ultimately in Myanmar's interest, it is not in Myanmar's interest to allow these insurgent groups to flourish on their own territory. But yes, if this government comes under extra pressure of China and Chinese intelligence, we can see that this is too early to say. We do have, at the level of defense forces, our interactions also with Myanmar army. So that could be one possibility. We have to be alive to that possibility. But what I would say here, I would only supplement what previous panelists have said, that yes, Myanmar army had its own concerns. It's not only one-sided concerns, these are multiple concerns. Anywhere, this kind of arrangement where it has been existing, where dictators and authoritarian elements have been sharing power or directly or indirectly, they are always apprehensive of rule of law. So despite 2015, this partial transition to democracy, Myanmar army has been a factor. And as the ambassador pointed out, Army Chief Min Aung Hlaing was expected to retire and get a lot of things to hide in his cupboard. And it's not only, I would say, Rohingya. Rohingya was one factor. But besides Rohingya, you see, there are a lot of these forces operate through I would say, a string of loyalists. And these loyalists have a lot of things to hide. And they are apprehensive of rule of law. And I will say a good number of these loyalists, as per media reports, by reading this, what I can analyze, that they did have some kind of illegitimate commercial or a lot of commercial interest vis-a-vis due to Chinese investments or Chinese commercial interest in the region. So there would have been some difficulty if there was complete transition to democracy. And as NLD had won more seats, little more seats in both houses, and this party, army-backed party, had been almost reduced to irrelevance, and they were quite apprehensive. So that was one factor. So if you see in the entire range, it shows that this dispensation, military-backed forces, and the kind of allies it is having within Myanmar, these allies are somehow beholden to China. And without consulting China, it is quite doubtful, without some degree of confidence from China, support from China, he could have gone for something as drastic as this. This is difficult to assume. So in light of these things, we have to rather be very circumspect. But I would say that within Myanmar army, in the past also when Myanmar army had been ruling, things were not very cohesive. There were elements within Myanmar army who did not endorse Chinese takeover or brazen exploitation of Chinese resources in Myanmar. So those pressures would be there. But having said that, the chief man itself, if the regime itself is dependent on Myanmar, it certainly reduces space for us. And we have to be extremely careful, I would say. I would also go on to say that, the very geopolitics of this region is such that we cannot afford to be inward-looking. We have to have much wider engagements in all the neighboring countries. Not that we have to interfere, but we have to have engagement so that all stakeholders trust us and we are aware of these things. So here I would say it is going to have implications which are not in our interest. And secondly, we have been certainly found somewhere lacking. Our engagements have not increased. Whatever may be the regime in neighboring countries, we have to engage everyone. All stakeholders we have to engage and we have to earn their trust. So certainly we have not gone to that level, and naturally there will be issues. But I'm still confident that there will be little space. It's not that everything is closed in Myanmar. Our army-to-army level interactions, otherwise interactions should help us protect some of our interests.
But Mr. Oja, as you talked about engagement, India has been engaging with even the military of Myanmar. In fact, General Min was here about a year back, more than a year back. And even recently our army chief went there and met the leadership there. So India has been engaged. I mean, our foreign secretary also went there. So India has been engaged, but still, do you think that things are going out of control or what?
No, I wouldn't say engaging, is one level, but ultimately we have to ensure that, how much power asymmetry has increased between India and China. That is going to get reflected in our relationship with these countries as well. Because China all said and is extremely powerful, and their engagement is some people, some corporate elements, some commercial elements, some generals. They could be direct beneficiary of something like this. If our engagement is fine, as I said, that even when military was directly ruling, there were some elements who were very much inclined in favor of India. So it's not that, these forces are going to be totally against India. Certainly, I don't assume that that space we are going to get. But at the same time, there is no denial that something of this nature just cannot happen without Chinese backing. Even if we were engaging them, even if they had good intent, circumstances are such that, these forces are very powerful and these forces are being backed by China. Those two factors we cannot discount. Apart from engagement, I would say how much trust you are able to win. Even if you are able to engage them, even if you are talking, speaking, but somehow we were not able to win their trust. If there was something, our engagement should be such that if there's some difference between democratic and pro-democratic forces, our presence should have assured both the sides, and something of this nature should have been avoided.
Basically, you're talking about influence. Ambassador Trigunath is with us. So, as Mr. Oja raised pertinent questions about how much, he says, trust, I will say influence India has on the military leadership, or it is just engagement, or we have been able to have some influence, or China has scored over us. What do you say?
Well, China has not scored over us. I would say what Mr. Oja is saying is absolutely correct. But over the last decade, I would say, we have had this love and hate relationship for a while. It only started off because once things began to improve there, although we have dealt with earlier with the army, when the military rule was there for a very long period of time. But what has happened is over the last few years, we have seen that there has been a greater focus by India in engaging with Myanmar much more strategically. Whether it is in our connectivity issues, whether it was in the defense sector. In fact, we just gave them a kilo-class submarine last month.
Right.
We have also all the chiefs of the army, different Navy, Army, Air Force, they have been coming to India. Their officers are being also trained in India. So it is not that it is against us. The question is that China is able to, like, for example, today at the UNSC, there was supposed to be a statement condemning this takeover, was to be done against this coup, which China refused to agree to
which China and Russia have blocked. Both of them have
blocked.
Yes,
they work together in the thing, but mainly it is the China, not Russia so much, but Russia goes with China with the same kind of a language.
Yeah.
So what I would say is that the China has a China-Myanmar economic corridor, if you remember. They are also doing several major projects there. They are the ones who have been keeping track with the army. Their foreign minister was there last month, Wang Yi, and he had met their general also at the same time. So I believe that the problem this time is that even the Suu Kyi, even though she has won with a very large majority, she has herself in the international arena by supporting the Rohingya genocide and all those things, has really lost a lot of ground in the bargain.
So I would assume that she did it under the military pressure, I guess. Maybe.
Well, as I said, the two of them are driving it together.
Yeah.
When she held the army in great district, but she refused to, according to the report, she refused to renew this General Lang's tenure after he retired in July. Which means that he'll be totally exposed to the international court, criminal court,
right,
and others. Like India and other countries have actually lodged against him personally. So he wants to, plus he also controls a lot of businesses and the military-industrial complex. So therefore, he wants to protect his own interests in that sense. And I think he found an excuse in the irregularities in the election to basically call it a coup or emergency or whatever you may call it.
Okay, Mr. Oja, as we talked about Suu Kyi's arrangement, like last 5 years we saw she was sharing power with the military, and military, I'll say that military dictated everything and she was kind of sober. So is it that now she got the absolute power and that is what got the military worried, and that's why, or besides what Ambassador Trigunite said that the army chief is going to retire and he may face international prosecution. What do you say?
I don't think it's one person who makes a difference. Wherever this kind of arrangement is there, there are a lot of vested interests. They come up and they work as a very kind of block, a very cohesive lobby kind of thing. So I would say entire lobby somehow was feeling threatened that if there's a transition to rule of law, all of them had a lot to hide, a lot to fear for. Of course, Suchi destroyed part of her credibility for whatever reason. She was trying to rather placate armed forces. She had said that she loved the army and she admired the army, and on Rohingya, certainly she was quiet, and this defied her general image. So she was looking for all these years, she was looking for some kind of refuge, for some kind of understanding. And secondly, I would say that when I say India's engagement, look, even if you give money to people, even if you give things to people, that alone is not going to earn you goodwill. You have to see who are other forces.
Right.
China has been trying to discredit democracies everywhere, trying to establish diplomacy of its own model, and it has its own way of engaging. As the ambassador only pointed it out, that large number of commercial projects are there, construction projects are there, infrastructure projects are there, mining is there. All these places China is involved. And China's way of working is what? Creating a kind of lobby where people develop some kind of interests which are not transparent, and naturally they would like to conciliate. Moment there's transition, these things are opened up, there will be difficulties. And earlier also I did not say that army is against India. No. Within army, even when army was ruling it, there was a significant section which was very favorably inclined towards India. Given a chance, if Myanmar's nationalist elements, they would prefer to align to India, because China has just been plundering their resources, exploiting their cheap labor, virtually destroyed their forests and taken away a lot of their metals and minerals, and given almost pittance in return. So virtually China has colonized, all these years China has colonized Myanmar for all practical purposes, but within that there are elements who stand to benefit out of it. But wherever there are nationalist elements, I remember 2 decades back, Senior General Thanshe, he was one person who was always favorably inclined towards India, believed in building bridges with India, and many times there was this kind of support and cooperation towards India. So it's not that, that by this situation, Myanmar would go totally against India. As we said, we do have engagement, there is some element, but in overall, I would say this is a setback for India, and it's not at a tactical level, as Ambassador also said, and my other area is from geopolitics, national security strategy. And national security strategy involves, not only diplomacy and not only military. It is way beyond that. So we do not have that kind of capacity to engage our neighbors, smaller neighbors, the way China is able to do. And that is a long run. We have to think on those lines, building strong private sector capacity to undertake projects and carry out investments, and not do things in Chinese way, but to do things in a way where Burmese people also benefit, and transition to democracy and transparency becomes easier. Chinese model is what? You select a small number of people, through their loyalists they wield influence, and once they wield influence they use coercive power, and by using coercive power, this small number of people can be helpful, and you exploit resources of those countries. This is the model which China has been practicing here. China has been practicing in smaller islands in Far East, Africa, as well as Central Asia. So this is one area I feel is a very different world than what it was 20 years back. And India has to be more proactive. We have to be outward looking. We have to be domestically strong. Otherwise, this is one corridor or one window of opportunity we are missing in history. This will go down as a bad faith if we don't wake up and we don't start looking strategically at these neighbors. And then, I won't say that expanding our influence in an imperial way, but definitely to defend our legitimate security interests, we should do everything possible to avoid this kind of arrangement anywhere in our neighborhood or even beyond extended neighborhood.
Right. Ambassador Trigunite, you heard what Mr. Ojha said. It's a kind of setback, and actually, so India needs to have a long-term strategy. And particularly, I'll refer that India played a big role in 2008 when the transition took place, or the cyclone hit Myanmar, and America was allowed to put additional sanctions. India kind of played a good role to, protect Myanmar at that time. And as you mentioned, we have given them a submarine also, and also we had been giving vaccine and other things. But still, China appears to have some stronger lobbies, as Mr. Ojha says. What do you say?
You see, for China is an autocratic country. So as far as autocratic countries concerned, they gel very well with the other autocrats. Now, the general himself who has declared the coup and is taken over is obviously far more inclined towards China, because China is not sensitive to a democracy in that sense of the term. So therefore, it's a natural thing. Plus, he has had long-term relationship with China, not now. Whereas we have started our defense engagement and trying to keep track with all the actors, not only Suchi, but even with the army. So I personally believe that I think we have got a reasonable heft in the place and stay there. But at the same time, it has been India's policy not to promote or project democracy like the Americans and others do. Our policy has been to assist the countries in nurturing the democratic institutions. And so, anything else we consider as an internal interference to the matter. And the fact that it has not been a very strong statement from the Ministry of External Affairs says that we are still watching the situation rather closely as to how it plays out. It is possible because, the general has probably calculated very well that the opposition is not, at the moment, a little less coherent or less vocal. But the global outrage that is happening right now against Myanmar, one will have to see as to how much pressure that puts on the general and how soon he is able to come back to the table to restore, have new elections or something. Because it is very unlikely that the same elections will be upheld while he is in charge. So India's position has been very clear in that you cannot burn your boats, whatever you have earned in the meantime. So your national interest is also supreme. So the moment you go and criticize
Ambassador,
burning your boat.
Yeah. Ambassador, that's what my next question is. Since now the emergency or the coup, military will be ruling for at least 1 year or if not more. So now it will be a dicey situation for India, how to approach it. And since we are a regional power, it's another headache now we have. So it will be very difficult for India to, approach on this situation.
You see, we also have people of Indian origin there, over a million and a half. Right? That is also very important. Plus, we are doing SITI report and so many other,
What you
have to look after those also.
Yeah, what I meant was whether we should recognize this illegal regime, and if we don't, if we don't accept this or recognize it, then how do you engage with the military regime for our own interests in the northeast, particularly in the context of northeast insurgency? So those questions will be there, no?
You see, what will happen is, I do not know what the position the government will take eventually, but what I can gather from the current statement is they have said that they are monitoring closely. Now, how much the international pressure, because irrespective of China supporting Myanmar, Myanmar cannot antagonize the whole world community in that sense of the term, especially the Western world and especially under Biden now. So Biden has been very, very forthright. So it is very likely that instead of 1 year, they will say, okay, in 3 months or 6 months, something like that, they will be able to call for the new elections or something, or transfer of power, whichever way it happens. So they release Suchi. So those things, if there are those indicators, that means the world is willing to wait for 6 months under the international domain or something, or whenever the UNSC resolution is passed, in which we are also a member, now as a non-permanent member of the UNSC. So there our contribution can be far more in that sense to protect our interests.
But again, China will block it, no? There will be no sanction, I guess.
No, I don't think it will be blocked again. It will only be wording. That is what they discussed. It will be huge, but it will not be like, they will veto on this.
Okay. So we have to close. One last question to Mr. Oja. What implication do you think it will have on our northeast insurgency particularly? Should we be worried or we should not be worried? As I mentioned, if we don't engage with the military leadership there, so it may allow our northeast insurgents who had been taking refuge there to have a field day. What do you say?
I would say two things, Ajayji. It's not that we should stop engaging. We have our ways and channels of engaging. Engagement must continue with each and every neighbor. This is all said and done, their domestic issue. What I've been trying to say, that in this kind of situation, we should not become completely irrelevant. We should become relevant. Whatever traditional norms of diplomacy, etc., is concerned, I am not questioning that. I am not saying we should interfere. What I am saying, we need to have goodwill of all sections in all these neighboring countries. And in a situation like this, the number of Indian origin people, etc., is irrelevant when small number of people are calling shots. So I am going a little beyond that. So we should look at Northeast, and we should look beyond that. What China is looking at, it's not only looking at the security of its own frontiers, it is expanding its domain of influence beyond that. From that area, it can target you. Whereas we are so inward looking, we are just looking at Northeast. So not only Northeast should be our interest. Our interest should go beyond that. But having said that, I would say two things. We should continue our engagement. We should come up as one entity which should be acceptable to various stakeholders within Myanmar. Nationalist forces, right-minded forces in Myanmar, they would lean towards India. It's only because we don't have that kind of financial, technological and otherwise economic prowess which can win over powerful elements. We lack that compared to China. Otherwise, nationalist elements would lean over us. Secondly, I would also say that right now it's too difficult to say, but I'm very confident that this will not be a monolithic entity. There would be sections within Myanmar armed forces who would be favorably inclined towards India. I think we should continue with our engagement. We should do everything possible as far as our core interests are concerned in Northeast and beyond. We should keep engaging armed forces. We don't have that liberty to, like America. America is far too removed. It can say whatever it wishes.
Right.
We don't have that liberty in this region. But at the same time, I would say it is our kind of wake-up call. I'm not saying tactically what should happen, what should be done. We have to build all our capacities so that none of these neighboring countries' territories are used by third forces to use it for purposes that are prejudicial to our national interest or our national security.
Right. So India needs to have a balanced approach and keeping India's own interests in mind. But the program time is over. Thank you both of you for participating in this debate today. Thank you. This is all in the agenda today. Thanks for watching. I'll be back with another important topic tomorrow. Till then, goodbye.